Thank you everyone for coming, especially to my mother for showing out, as I say. I thought, when my mother told me about this amazing program, kudos to Michelle for arranging an amazing program, which I hear a lot about. I thought, what could I contribute, so I thought, something, in the style of, yeshiva learning that I've been for the last, 7.5 years. And just to give everyone a chance to, walk into and, be part of the Beit Midrash, the study hall, and sitting, and of course what could be better than learning a passage of Talmud, in groups of study partners together. Whenever I think about the experience of studying Talmud, so I think about a story that somebody told me from actually before I came to Yeshiva University, which is related to the relations between Yeshiva University and none other than the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is very interested in how to combine secular studies and theological studies. And for them it's a big problem, apparently, because they have theological schools and they have secular Catholic schools, and they can never work out how to put those two together and create a positive environment. So they wanted to come to visit Yeshiva University, which is that combination, to see how do you do it, how do you create that vibrant combination. And the thing that most surprised me is when they walked into the study hall, they saw all the boys sitting in yeshiva yelling and arguing with each other. This they couldn't understand. They said, in our seminaries, it's basically you learn from the text. This is what the dogma is, and there is no question and arguing. And that, for me, really epitomizes. That really epitomizes what the Talmud is all about. The Talmud is one long argument. Right? It's a protracted series of discussions. Oftentimes there's a lack of clarity, and you can really imagine yourself sitting in the study hall and hearing the voices together. So what I thought we might do is we might study a passage of Talmud which we're going to relate to the topic of environmental sustainability, which is tonight's topic. I'll just give a brief introduction to what we're going to be looking at, and then we'll break up into either pairs, chavrutot, or into groups, however people feel comfortable, and we'll have a chance to dig into the material ourselves, and I'll go around and be able to be helping in whatever capacity I can. So, what's the topic of the section of Talmud we study? Well, as I think my mother told us mentioned in one of the previous sessions discussing Talmud, you can't study one part of the Talmud without studying the entirety of the Talmud. Everything in Judaism is interconnected. And so what we're going to be looking at is particularly the intersection between two different areas of Jewish thought. Our topic is going to be sustainability, and from that lens we're going to be looking at it from the perspective of a verse that comes up in a few weeks from now in the weekly Parshat Shoftim, and that is the first prohibition on the destruction of fruit trees. Right? This famous concept that Torah states that when you besiege a city, the Jewish army, remembering going into the land of Israel for the first time, coming out of Egypt, they're coming into the land of Canaan, and they're going to be besieging cities. The Torah states that when you besiege a city, you should not cut down the fruit trees as you besiege it. Rather, you should save those. And with the famous line that perhaps everybody knows, which is that for is the tree of the field a man that it could run away from you. In other words, it's a particular obligation of us to treat natural resources with particular respect, even in such a context as warfare. And that is generalized by the Talmud to a broader prohibition on wastefulness. And the phrase we're going to see is Bal Tashchit. Do not destroy, do not waste, do not consume resources or destroy resources wantonly. That's one side of the picture. What are we going to be comparing it to? We're going to be comparing it to the laws of Shabbat. Now, this is going to be an area that perhaps not everyone is familiar with, because we're going to get into some technicalities of the halakha, of the Jewish law with regards to Shabbat observance. And after all, that's what Talmud is like. As you start a new page, a new topic, an unfamiliar subject, I'm going to give a brief introduction to what we're going to be seeing from that perspective to make it a little bit easier to get into the material. And by the way, if there's anything that you don't understand or any questions you have, please feel free to interrupt me because we're really here to discuss. So, in order to compare the laws of Shabbat with the laws of wastefulness and destructiveness, it's necessary for us to understand that the Talmudic concept of violation of Shabbat is bound up with the concept of creative action. Right? God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th, and we too have to rest from creation on the 7th day. What does that mean? That means if a person is involved in a constructive activity, that could potentially be a violation of Shabbat. If a person is, however, involved in a destructive activity, he destroys something, right? So then that's not going to be a biblical violation from the Torah's perspective of Shabbat. Although the rabbis did forbid even destructive acts. What's an example? So we know that, for instance, to light a candle to create illumination is one of the things that the Torah states one's not supposed to do on Shabbat. However, to burn a piece of paper in order to destroy it is a destructive act. It's not included within the prohibition. So far, does that make sense? That's the first concept we're going to need to have in opening up the Talmudic source. The second concept, which is a little bit more of a delicate concept.
I will ask. So the candle is burning, it's destroying the wax.
Right.
Prohibited because of that or because
no, the reason why lighting the candle would be prohibited would be because you're generating light, right? You're doing something productive. You're always looking for that which is productive, and here we're going to see the Talmud's going to be comparing between the prohibition on destroying things in general, right, and the laws of Shabbat, where ironically, if you're destructive, you're better off, right? That's a point to get. On Shabbat, if someone does something destructive, then they're less in violation. So far, again, and we have a little bit of a glossary on the sheet, and everything is translated. And I'll be going to have to help with any lack of clarity. Now, the second concept that we have to get now is that when the Torah prohibits work on Shabbat, when a person does the act that violates Shabbat, so then one would imagine that they have intention for that act itself. What do I mean by that? Somebody could light a candle in order to have the candle lit, or he could light the candle in order to destroy it and remove it. Right? Or another example, a person could dig a hole because he wants to have a hole, or he could dig a hole because he wants the dirt from the hole. In other words, sometimes a person can do something which, for the secondary consequence of that action. One more example, let's say a person could burn rubbish because he wants to heat himself up, or he could burn rubbish because he wants to remove the smell. We're going to be talking about a case of doing something to remove the other consequence, the secondary consequence. In other words, and we're going to see, again, I'm sorry, it's a little bit abstract, but we're going to tie it down and make it relevant as we go through. We're going to see a dispute about such actions. When a person does an action, not for the action itself, but for the secondary consequence of that action, that is going to be a dispute in the Talmud about whether he is considered to be in violation of Shabbat. So for instance, everyone would agree that if someone digs a hole on Shabbat because they want a hole, they would be in violation of Shabbat. What if they dig a hole in order to get the dirt, which is a secondary consequence? So then we're going to see a dispute in the Talmud between two different opinions. So that's the second concept that we need to have in our heads as we approach the text. And let me just see if if that is clear so far, if we can have any questions on those two concepts, and then we'll be able to open up the text together and challenge ourselves.
Just summarize some of that.
The first concept is that the Torah violation of Shabbat is only when something is done constructively, but if someone does something destructively, destroys something on Shabbat, that is not considered to be a creative act, and therefore he's better off because he didn't violate Shabbat by doing a creative action. That's the first concept. The second concept is we're going to see a dispute between two rabbis in the Talmud regarding when someone does an action, not for the action itself, but for a secondary consequence of that action, such as digging a hole to get the dirt from the hole, such as burning rubbish to get rid of the smell, as opposed to for the act of burning itself. Those are the two concepts that we're going to work with. And we have a little Rashi trying to explain it a little bit more closely. Those are the two concepts that the Talmud is going to be discussing.
It's also in English as well,
yes,
right?
everything is translated. There's Hebrew / Aramaic for those who want to break their teeth, and there is everything is translated. Now, what's going to be the format? Well, we're going to open up the Talmudic text. We're going to open with a Mishnah. Mishnah is the first redaction of the oral tradition, written by Rabbi Judah the Prince in around about the 1st century CE. And the Talmud is going to be discussing and commenting on the Mishnah, raising trouble, as it were, trying to knock down the Mishnah, comparing it to other sources. And we're going to study with partners or groups. We're going to be studying the diction of the Talmud, trying to understand it. We're going to have a few comments, a comment of Rashi on the side that you could look at to clarify the text. And then what's going to be the goal? To achieve understanding of the Talmudic passage. And then we're going to compare it, and this is where things will get interesting, we're going to compare it to some statements of Maimonides, the Rambam, the great codifier, who ostensibly is codifying the conclusion of the Talmudic text, and we're going to compare our conclusion of our study with what Maimonides says, and discuss how to resolve it, how to unify this Maimonides with the Talmudic text. So that's your mission. Your mission is to understand the text, compare it to the Maimonides codification. He's written in the 12th century, about 700 years after the Talmud was sealed, and try to achieve a little understanding of what he writes in light of our study. So it's a big challenge, and I expect to hear a lot of discussion, and I'll be going around to help, and do whatever I can to either make it more clear or less clear, depending on how you're doing. And then we'll, when we come back to discuss again, we're going to present, at least one understanding of the words of Maimonides, and thereby try to derive a broader lesson on our topic for tonight, which is environmental sustainability. So that's the Jewish way to get to answers, is you start all the way at the other end, and then hopefully you come to your destination. So let me give out the sheets. Well done everybody. Well done everybody. It was really, for me, it was a great experience to come home and see, the phrase used in Yeshiva is a Kol Torah, the sound of Torah, right? The sound of Torah here, in my hometown. It was very, very nice, and especially great to hear people raising all kinds of side issues, peripheral issues. As much as I was interested in getting people to a certain point, the text has a way of taking you to wherever it wants you to go, wherever you want to go, and that's also very wonderful. So now let's try to tie things together a little bit and see if we can reach the topic for tonight, the sensible topic for tonight. Some people question, which is the topic of environmental sustainability. But first, let's have a little bit of a recap of what we've learned. And I don't know if anyone wants to volunteer to present the first part, which is the Talmudic discussion, as we first read it. Anyone want to volunteer to present how they understood it when we first opened up? Volunteer? This is the easy part. This is the easy part. You don't have to do this time. Okay, so
Gary doesn't understand a lot.
Okay, so why don't you give us your synopsis? How did we begin?
Okay, the Mishnah says that you no, I can't.
Very, very modest, very modest. Okay, so let me do the first part. The first part was almost the most complicated part, at least so you thought until you got to the last part. We began by posing a contradiction regarding the question of whether someone who tears garments in anger is liable or exempt on Shabbat, or whether it's considered, right, or whether he's liable or exempt on Shabbat. That was the question, that was the contradiction. The Talmud resolved the contradiction by saying that it depends on the dispute that we talked about at the beginning about secondary consequences, right? The primary consequence of destroying the shirt is not the intention of the ripper, it's rather how it makes him feel afterwards. It's a secondary consequence, right? Therefore, it was included within that dispute. Then we moved on to the next part where we said, well, according to the opinion that it is considered to be liable because of the secondary consequence, isn't it a destructive act? That was the question that comes up. It's destructive because you're tearing the shirt. You're tearing the garment. The Talmud answered that, and now this, maybe you can pick up from here. How is it a constructive act?
Because it makes you feel good.
Makes you feel good. Very good. Now, the Talmud raised a problem with that proposition. What was the problem?
How is it permissible at all?
Correct. Okay, good. Now, what does that mean? What is the problem? Why is that a challenge to the proposition that we had that it's considered constructive? Rashi explained.
Rashi says because it's never permissible.
And therefore?
So therefore, it's not permissible during the week, it's not permissible on Shabbat, because you're an idolater.
Okay, and therefore? It's destructive. Right? Rashi, the Talmud directly, frontally challenges the proposition that giving into your anger is a constructive act, and says it's not constructive, it's destructive. Why? Because you're giving into your anger, you're feeding your impulses, and it's a destructive act, and therefore the Talmud had to come up with a new resolution, which was what? What is really being referred to?
Anger or
pretending to be angry. Right? Pretending to be angry for disciplinary purposes is a constructive act, and therefore that was what was being referred to. Whereas actually tearing something in anger is destructive, and therefore, right? And therefore it would be permissible and not exempt from the violation of Shabbat. Okay, and we're gonna come back to the question of the disciplinary method of pretending to be angry and breaking things towards the end of our discussion, because I think it's going to tie into our topic very nicely. And we already had people who objected to it on the grounds of various psychological or pedagogical theories. But we're going to come back to that. So the upshot of the discussion seemed to be, the way we read it with Rashi, was that tearing a garment in anger, in true anger, is destructive and it's exempt on Shabbat, whereas in feigned anger, it's constructive and it's a violation of Shabbat.
When you say exempt, you mean exempt from the punishment that you would get?
Correct. It's not considered a Torah prohibition, it's not considered a biblical prohibition of Shabbat. That's correct. Then we opened up Maimonides, we opened up the Rambam, and we saw him in three places consistently saying the opposite of what we had just learned. He was consistently saying that somebody who gives into their anger and breaks something and destroys something, or their vengeful feelings, and burns down somebody else's house and so on, is considered to be engaged in a constructive activity, right? And that challenged our understanding, right? Because we understood that the Talmud had rejected that view. The Talmud had rejected that view because of this concept that it's feeding the evil inclinations like idolatry and so on. And so therefore we were not alone in our puzzlement, because the Ra'avad, the Rambam's rival, all through his work, attacks and criticizes him, sometimes nicely and sometimes not so nicely. And he said it doesn't make any sense. The Talmud said the opposite. The Talmud said it's like an idolater. The Talmud said it's destructive, and therefore it should be exempt, not a violation of Shabbat on a Torah level. And so then our challenge was to explain how the Rambam understood the Talmud. We talked about this a little bit in the groups, that the Talmud is the codifier of the Talmud, Pius Salan. He's the only one that ever wrote a summary of all the laws of the entire Talmud, and therefore he's certainly trying to codify what is in the Talmud, and either he just made a really bad mistake, or he had some other reading, some other understanding. And that was what we had, the commentator on the Rambam, the Vidal of Tolosa in Spain, the Magid Mishnah, always printed on the side of the Rambam in every classical edition. He explained how the Rambam read the text. I think Benoit understood it very well. So would you like to tell us how the Rambam understood the text of the Talmud? Oh, wow.
I was trying to say that Maimonides had a different reading, because he was trying to say, well, that's a new comment compared to where you were listening to me. But maybe what he was trying to say is that it was not allowed on Shabbat, and therefore, how come is it not allowed on Shabbat? That's because it's created. Because maybe Maimonides wasn't comfortable saying that it was allowed on Shabbat. But my understanding was that compared to the first page, so that's when you were, that Maimonides was reading the Mishnah without Rashi's comment at the very, the second page of your explanation, and therefore was reading like Rabbi Avi, saying that tearing a garment apart, either by year or morning, was created because your
let me take the last part of what you're saying and run with it, which is that according to the Rambam, it seems that Rabbi Avin's theory is retained in the conclusion. Rabbi Avin had said it's constructive. You make yourself feel like that's called constructive, and that apparently was never challenged. That was never rejected. That is one thing that shines forth very clearly, is that the Rambam is taking what we thought was the middle of the discussion and highlighting that as the conclusion. Which leads us to wonder, what was the rest of the discussion? And that's where the Magid Mishnah of Vidal Tolosa said, he theorized, trying to work backwards, because of course the Rambam never gave any explanation for his ex cathedra statement. Right? He never gave a source book to explain why he said what he said. Kind of like Fermat's last theorem, you work it out on your own. Right? And of course, just parenthetically, I don't remember who said this, but someone pointed out that the Rambam's book was the book that was supposed to end all discussion, the final codification. But of course, it spawned more discussion than any other book since the Talmud, because everyone's now trying to work out, well, why did he say what he said? How can we disagree with this? So it seems that the Rambam had a different interpretation, and the key part was that line that Mr. Sohn was pinpointing. Is it permitted to do so? What was the import of that line? According to Rashi, it had been a challenge to Rabbi Avinu. It's not permitted. That shows that it's destructive. According to Rambam, it appears, according to Maimonides, that the real import of that line was, how can you say that it's not allowed on Shabbat? That makes it sound like it is allowed during the week. And therefore, it can't be what we're talking about. The concept is not challenged. It really is constructive. But it couldn't be that which is referred to in the Mishnah, because the Mishnah says it's not allowed on Shabbat. Which implies, the implication is that it is allowed during the week, and that's wrong. And that was the Talmud's question, not what we initially thought according to Rashi.
So Rashi was wrong.
Rambam disagrees with Rashi. There are different readings of the text. And as we said, it's like walking into a study hall. We hear the question, is that really permitted? But we have two different interpretations of the question. What was the question? According to Rashi, the question was, if it's not permitted, it's clearly destructive. According to the Rambam, the question was, it's not permitted, therefore it's constructive, but it can't be that which was referred to. Okay. That was, yes.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
According to Rashi, the question was, is that really permitted? Isn't it really, and that indicates that it's truly a destructive act because of the consequences of the act.
And then they are not liable on Shabbat.
That's right. And according to the Rambam, the question was, is that really permitted? True, it's constructive and it is liable on Shabbat, but that can't be what was referred to in the Mishnah because the implication would then be incorrect. And the implication would be that it is allowed during the week, and that's not correct. Yes?
That's begging the question. The question that came to my mind is, why is it not permitted during the week?
Brilliant. And that's exactly where we want to move to next, which is, and that's where we kind of come to our topic, which is, it seems that according to Rambam, according to Maimonides, we look at this action from two different lenses. From the perspective of Shabbat, it's constructive. Right now, he feels better. He feels better, so it's a constructive act. And yet, it's forbidden. Why is it forbidden during the week? It's a constructive act, right? It's a good thing, presumably. But yet, we say that it's idolatrous. It's ultimately going to lead down the wrong path, and it's something that you're not allowed to do. Despite the fact that from a certain perspective, it in fact is constructive. And the question that we now ask ourselves is, what is, now that we have analyzed from a legal perspective the discussion, what are the implications of that idea? Yes.
It's a question of the greater harm or greater good.
I think those are both two ways of looking at the issue. In other words, when we look, but first let's open the floor. Why these two different perspectives? From the perspective of Shabbat, it's constructive. But yet from a broader perspective, it's considered to be a destructive and harmful act, which is not allowed.
So where does Maimonides say that it's not permitted during the week?
That you have to look at other sections. The Rambam talks in general about the prohibition of anger and how one mustn't give in to one's anger. I didn't exert that here.
It's on a different reference.
Yeah,
it's not allowed during the week, but based on another Mishnah.
Exactly. I'm getting angry and so on and so forth. So let's open the floor. Why these two different perspectives? So we already had two different perspectives from here. Short term versus long term, right? And another perspective we had is greater harm versus greater good. Anyone want to contribute to that discussion?
Destructive have a good or bad association.
Right.
Destructive is an act. Something has been constructed. But that which has been constructed will be bad. That which has been constructed is good. What Rambam is saying, Maimonides is saying, is that because you're constructing bad, it is bad, regardless of whether it's constructed.
I think that's very correct. In other words, from the perspective of the object that we're looking at, something has been constructed. A good feeling, a positive feeling, feeling better, has been constructed. But yet, from the perspective of good and bad, that somehow we have to analyze the question with a different pair of glasses.
Is the interpretation of the act as it relates to Shabbat, is that only about the individual?
So
and whereas if it's in a weekday, is it considered a wider concept, the action considered a wider concept?
I mean, again, even on Shabbat, we will look at it from these two different perspectives. That's clearly true. It's not that on the weekday on Shabbat we put on an additional pair of glasses on top of our weekday glasses, but we don't take away the weekday glasses. So that's an important piece to highlight. But that could very well be. In other words, from the perspective of Shabbat, we look at the person themselves. From the perspective of this broader perspective of destructive behavior in general, then we're going to look at a broader perspective of how it impacts on others and so on. So
Like the micro, macro.
exactly, excellent. So these are all the things, and I'd like now, in the time that we have left, I'd like to share with you some further sources which we'll discuss together. This time, no cut and thrust, but we'll definitely have discussion in light of these sources. I'll try to give you, my 2 cents on the question. There's plenty of sheep. That's all we need. Give this now.
Is there any more?
Yes, it is. For some reason, I don't get too much of that. Honoring my mother. Is there enough there?
Yeah.
A couple more. We're good? It's good?
Yep, that's fine.
No one has to share? Okay. We don't encourage sharing around here. Okay. And I want to draw out of these 5 sources here a perspective on the question of destructive behavior, not with regards to Shabbat, but in general destructive behavior. We began with the idea that we're going to compare the general prohibition on being destructive, which we learned from the idea of destroying the fruit trees, with Shabbat. So we've seen that when it comes to Shabbat, Maimonides has the concept that we look in the very short term, we look at the individual, we don't necessarily weigh up all the factors, but we look at the question from a very narrow perspective. But yet, despite that fact, when it comes to the broader issues of how one should conduct oneself as a citizen of the planet, right, we are looking at a broader perspective, and we're able to say that something is bad, or something is negative, based on perhaps its long-range consequences. And I think that emerges very clearly, despite all the lack of clarity. But I think when we're done beating our heads against the wall, we emerge with what the Talmud calls the sweetness of Torah, which is the understanding that we come out at the end, that we have these 2 perspectives on everything that we do. You can look at things in the short term, and you can look at things in the long term. And I want to explore this long-term concept through a few different sources related to the prohibition of wastefulness in general. And I think that's what's going to serve as our take-home message for today. So let's look at the verses where the Torah teaches us this prohibition.
You can ask people.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. And let's try to extract a little bit more meaning from them. So I think I'll start by asking for a volunteer. Otherwise, I'm going to have to volunteer. Please, who wants to read the first source?
Sally.
Okay. This is why you need a manager.
Deuteronomy 15, verses 20, chapter 20, verses 19 to 20. When you shall besiege a city a long time, and making war against it, to take it, you shall not destroy the trees thereof by wielding an axe against them. For you shall eat from them, but you shall not cut them down, for it is the tree of the field man that should be besieged of you. Only the trees which you know are not trees for food, them you destroy and cut down to build bulwarks against the city that makes war with you until it falls.
Okay, so there's a lot of pieces here, right? What's the key distinction which the Torah is drawing between 2 kinds of trees, right?
Yeah.
Food in other words.
Fruit in other words.
Trees for food.
Trees for fruit. Okay.
For fruits.
Okay. I would. I thought if we're not living in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, probably trees for food will mean fruit trees. Although there are definitely trees which one can eat from, I guess, which are not fruit. Although,
Nuts.
yeah, maybe. Well, I mean, I don't know.
Are you a vine?
Maybe, presumably all these things are fruit trees, but maybe there's something where you can eat the trunk itself, eat the leaves. So at any rate, what? Okay, so now your hair splitting. Excellent. So, and again, there is a perspective here which we're not going to explore, which is that the most famous. What's the most famous part of this verse? Probably is man. Is the tree of the field a man that it should come against you? In other words, how can you take up arms against nature? Right? Nature is defenseless. Nature is not your enemy. Right? You have a responsibility to protect and cultivate natural resources in the natural world. This is associated with the mitzvah that was given to the first man in the Garden of Eden to serve and protect the world, to cultivate and grow and make the world a better place and to protect it. And sometimes the verse is taken metaphorically as saying that man is a tree of the field, right? And that there's a kinship between people and trees, a special relationship. There's a special similarity between them which underlies that obligation. But we're not going to explore that. That's a much more philosophical concept. We're going to work on building up the legal foundation that we've developed in this presentation, but I'm sure that maybe in a future installment of Kia Ora, somebody will take up the challenge to provide a Jewish perspective to the relation between man and nature in general. We're going to focus on, in fact, through our approach so far, seemingly legal portion of this phrase. Now, I call your attention to verse 20. And what does the verse say? Only the trees which you know are not trees for fruit. Let me ask you a question. On whom is the onus being placed? On you. On you. In other words, it's your responsibility to be sure. Now that's a very unusual concept, right? In other words, ordinarily, in life, sometimes you roll the dice. Sometimes in life you take chances, you take risks. And that's true in Torah also, according to many authorities. We're not going to get into the board of discussion here. But there are cases where, if you're not sure whether something is permitted or forbidden, you're allowed to take a risk. Right? Perhaps with regards to rabbinic prohibition, perhaps even from a Torah perspective with regards to Torah prohibition, sometimes you're allowed to take the plunge in life. Here, what's the Torah is sending us a message. And I think it fits with what we've been discussing up until now.
If you have to know, but if you have any doubt, you can't.
Correct. Correct. And I think that adds to our understanding that we're building here of our approach towards caring for the resources that God has provided us with in the world, caring for the world. That it's that long-term perspective, but it's not just a long-term perspective. It's also our responsibility to be sure that what we're doing is not going to have negative consequences. I think that fits very appropriately into that picture that we're building. Yes.
Trees for food, does that also include food for animals?
Mm-hmm. Because it's ma'achal.
Right.
So you can say ma'achal that you can eat from.
That could be, although
to be eaten from.
Although it does say, the verse 19 says, for you eat from it. So it probably refers to people.
It's a concern with mankind.
Right. Again, what we're seeing is we're seeing a qualitative difference. A tree that is not, the point here is to minimize the impact. In other words, you will cut down trees and you will use them for the siege. But you should prefer the trees that have a lesser contribution. Right? Again, there is that that anthropocentric viewpoint here, which is that the trees which have benefit for people have a higher priority than the trees that have benefit to the environment as a whole. But everything has its place. And I would add, I think that in light of what we're discussing, when we think about the long-term impact, and we reflect on the advances in biotechnology and exploitation of the natural world that has occurred in the last 50 years, you can ask my mother, right? Everything in this world, can be potentially something that's very positive, and we understand now that if we grow in our understanding that if we damage the ecosystem, we damage the environment, then we're all in the same boat together with the rest of nature, and that we don't have anywhere to run to. And so, the broader we draw our perspective, and the more we understand, the greater responsibility that places upon us. Let me call your attention to another source, which I think also touches on what we're talking about. And that's the second source here. So far we've seen one unusual legal principle with regards to this prohibition of destructiveness and wastefulness, is that the onus is upon you to be 100% sure of what you're doing. That's an unusual rule breaker. The second rule-breaking law that we see here is in the second verse, which is the Sifrei, a halachic midrash, from the same time period as the Mishnah, more or less. And the Sifrei states, do not destroy its trees wielding an axe against them. This is kind of like the Haggadah. The Haggadah on Pesach has portions which are halachic midrash. One might think that only by cutting with an axe is destroying trees. Well, I should really have somebody else. We have to have another volunteer. Michelle, you want to volunteer somebody else?
Jonathan Zimmerman.
It's like a VA or a Habo. Go ahead.
One might think that only by cutting with an axe, destroying the tree is forbidden. Therefore, the verse states, do not destroy the tree. Teach that even diverting a stream to dry out a tree is also forbidden.
In other words, there's two levels of action here, right? Sometimes you take a direct action, and sometimes the negative consequence is the indirect result, the downstream, literally, effect of your actions. And what we're learning here is that although sometimes in life a person can say, well, I did something in my little corner, it didn't have any negative consequences. Downstream it may, but that's not my problem. Sometimes a person can sort of bow out of responsibility for the negative consequences, and we have such a principle that's known in halakha as a grama, right? An indirect consequence, which is, again, a person is considered less responsible for those things which are only indirect consequences of his actions, the downstream effect of his actions. Here, what do we see? The Torah is holding us liable not just for taking an axe and actually cutting down the tree, but for taking some other action, which in the downstream is impacting upon the natural environment. And again,
But if it's to dry out a tree, what if your intention is not to dry out a tree?
I think that's a good. I think if we put everything in it, you have to be sure. In other words, ultimately, the message we're getting here is that it's all about responsibility and all about calculating the long-term impact. And there's no bowing out, there's no evading. I'm merely creating a plant over here to process, plastic. The leachings are not my responsibility. That can't be the perspective. Yes.
The risk of falling into the hole, I'm sure, has been down for me, even though it wasn't part of the intention of the dirt out. Does that relate in fact to the piece we were looking at earlier, when we were discussing that it's instructive to this environment, but it's forbidden to do it because it's the wrong thing to do, it's an evil thing to do. So here we have exactly the same thing. Diverting the stream in itself might be an evil thing, but the consequences are an evil thing.
I think that's 100% correct. I think they recently...
But only if it's a fruit tree, right?
Well, again, we saw that it's permissible to cut down the other trees to do something with them, right? Clearly, but if there's no positive consequence, then it will clearly be forbidden. Now, here we, and again, I think what you're saying is very correct. And I think that we did the Lorax recently, right? Nobody would question that the one-floor family in the Lorax, clearly, made good money of the exploitation of the different trees, in the book, right? It was clear they made, the book. They made these garments, which, everybody needs. But the downstream effect was devastating. Ultimately, even for them, the consequences were negative and for their entire environment. And once we broadened our horizons, they were able to look at it from those two levels. In other words, nobody is denying that the rubber factory or the plastic factory or the nuclear reactor is doing a helpful and useful thing. That's not the point. The point is that it is also going to have negative consequences, and how are we going to look at the big picture and not simply focus on today?
How do you then justify on here, like in the modern times, where Israel has water of every stream, river going?
Oh, that's an excellent question. With that in mind, let's look at the next. Let's look at the next.
Why does the Torah mention the X at all? If you were going to understand it according to the Sifra, why would the Torah even mention the X?
That's a great question.
I think.
It could be examined, but that's not usually the way the Midrash learns the verses. Why does the Torah mention it? Excellent.
It's always not to use an X.
It seemingly makes a difference.
The Torah could just say, you shall not destroy the trees. Why talk about the X?
I have to get back to you on that. Maybe we could do that. I don't know the answer. I'll it might.
That's the only way you cut a tree.
It could be in this case that you're cutting it down to make the battlement, so that's the example. I think no question, but if you know else, why the act is worth.
Oh, but when you have your concept in this rush of the modern concept we had of replanting or replenishing, you cut down a tree, you should try and replant. Was it anything like that? So if we only talk about cutting down, but there's nothing here about that. And how can people survive if they didn't have firewood or could build a house or build a fence?
Right, so this is the key question, the million-dollar question becomes how do you weigh it up?
Yeah.
Yes.
But one reason I said use an axe is to have chainsaws. But the axe is also a weapon of war.
Mm-hmm.
And the paragraph is discussing
the soldiers might have it on them.
in making war.
It could be. There's definitely what to look into there. But let me draw your
And they are talking about make war against the trees, as they said.
So it's a violent imagery.
Like you've got to take down a tree.
Right, they cut out. If you're making something.
Take a nail file to
If you're making battlements.
Well, you could burn it.
That's right. That's probably not going to help you make siege equipment.
And if you put the example with the axe, then people are going to say, well, I didn't do it with the action. I'm not doing, I'm not for. So that's how we humans work. You give us a rule and we find ways to break it. So they're getting the example of the water.
I'm wondering what's successful with pragmatic sense to remove a tree then. That's what I'm saying. If we don't have an axe, then axe is prohibited, and how do we naturally chop down a tree?
So the key, that brings us to the next. That brings us to the next question, which is again the question is there is $1 million question which is here is how do we weigh these things up? How do we weigh these things up? So take a look at the third verse, and you'll see a fascinating debate. I think a fascinating debate, which highlights 2 points I want to bring out from the first. So let's take a look at Michelle. You want to
See?
3.
Babylonian Talmud Traffic Shabbat 140b. Rav Chisda said, one who is capable of eating barley bread and instead eats wheat bread violates do not waste. Rav Papa said, one who is capable of drinking beer and drinks wine violates do not waste. But these declarations are incorrect, as one's own body do not waste is preferable.
What do you make of that? What's that last line?
Make your choice.
Your own bodies do not waste is preferable. In other words, there's a health benefit to eating wheat bread and drinking wine. There are higher quality foods, and so therefore, your body is also part of the environment, right? And therefore, it's true. On one level, eating barley bread and drinking beer is more economical, right? It's more economical. Perhaps we say nowadays might have, I don't know if it's true, but it might have less environmental impact, but that would be the parallel. But yet, and these initial rabbis are saying, hey, if you can have that, we could translate that as that smaller carbon footprint, right? that less wasteful thing, and you can live with that, you can manage that, then that should be preferred. But then the Talmud is turning around and saying, no, because you're doing it at the expense of your own health, right? So what's happening here? What's the debate here? The first one thing I'd like to highlight is that it's not even a question. What we're seeing here is that the Talmud says you can violate the prohibition on wasting not even by doing something that's overtly destructive, but merely by doing something that you could have
Done better.
You could have done better. Exactly. In other words, I have options on how to run my household. If I choose the way that is more destructive overall, even though perhaps in a vacuum that would have been a reasonable decision. But given that I have a better option, a less destructive option, suddenly, and this comes back to our point of responsibility and looking at the bigger picture. That's also highly unusual. Suddenly I could be held responsible, right, not for anything bad that I did, but for my failure to do better. That's very unusual, right? And again, highlights the unique character of this particular mitzvah. This particular mitzvah of not engaging in destructive or wasteful behavior obliges us, perhaps more than any other mitzvah, to take responsibility, to analyze everything that we do, even the bread that we eat. Is it having the minimum impact on our environment? But yet the Talmud then turns around and turns everything upside down. And what does the Talmud do? It says, wait a second. There's another side to this story, right? Right?
Can I give a practical example? In India, when you're Catholic, you're told, don't drink tap water, buy only bottled water, and there you are. Horrible environment, how many plastic bottles are you going through? And it's cheap. For your own health, but how many bottles are you producing? And in France, you don't need to drink bottled water. People do. They buy them by, 12 packs. It's crazy. But there you don't need to. But they're still buying bottled water. Yeah, so in India you do, but not in France. I think you're one of the cheapest consumers of bottled water, I think. I don't know. Yeah.
Then what? I'm not responsible.
We don't, as far as we are not like these Hollywood actresses, rinsing our shampoo with mineral water. At least we drink it. That's because you have a lot of you have a lot of products in the water, and it's not from the water that is contained in the tank for the city of Ora. That's because of the fittings, the plumbing stuff. You had a lot of people intoxicated. That's why a lot of people prefer to drink from bottles. Therefore, it is better for your body, and therefore.
Can I just say that we made the choice to use a filter rather than buying bottled water.
And now what is all of this? You not waste anything. Correct. Meaning that's part of the calculation too. There's the economic good of mankind, right? Don't forget money. Don't forget the Jewish view that money is not the root of all evil. Money is just how we measure productivity. It's how we run our society, right? So economic impact is also a piece of the puzzle. In other words, what does all of this highlight? There is no one-size-fits-all answer to any of. Once you get to the nuts and bolts of it, reasonable people will disagree. What can we insist on? What we can insist on that everyone who's going to come to the table has to be taking into account all levels of the question. That there has to be responsibility, there has to be accountability, there has to be dialogue for sure, and there has to be long-range analysis. And that is it's the long-range analysis which is the key, right? the short-range analysis can't come into the question. The question has to be, what's the overall impact of this going to be 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years down the road?
Can I just make a comment relating it? One body do not waste is preferable with a little bit of time, because what I sometimes find in New Zealand, compared to places like India, that a lot of resources are used in order to conserve various issues, various parts of the environment, various places, various species, with less consideration given to conservation of human species. Whereas in India, because the resources are so tight, actually the first priority is given to preserving the life of humans.
I think that's quite of course. But I think that one thing that we see here is that what the Talmud is saying is that while some rabbis had pushed a view that didn't put health in center stage, the final verdict, so to speak, is one that does give a very high emphasis to preservation of humanity, which fits with the overall perspective of the Torah. But I think that's a much bigger discussion. Yes.
I just wanted to say in relation to this eating food that is makes less out of the environment, that's better. We wouldn't eat meat in that case. We don't eat vegetarian because production of meat uses a lot more resources than production of vegetables.
I think that the blog, I don't want to get into factual questions. Obviously, there's a very wide-ranging debate about the facts of impact of the consumption, both on the environment and on personal health. And one thing that's clear is that before you make any declarations, you have to have all the facts. And sometimes the facts themselves are hard to get.
Yeah, but it's quite clear that if you're raising meat, if you're raising animals on land, that it takes more land and more.
I'm not an expert. I'm sure the people know much more about it than I do.
Pretty well accepted, I think.
Maybe it's not, and it's not the point of the discussion either.
Well, okay. Okay. It's definitely, again, as we can see, sometimes it's not only difficult to weigh up the morality of the different factors, but sometimes it's even difficult to figure out what the factors are in the first place.
Like nothing.
Okay. Now, I'd like to round out our discussion with the fourth source, and then give a little, asterisk to the fifth source, a little, something to leave you with. The fourth source, I think, is perhaps the linchpin of this entire discussion, and it encapsulates, I believe, the Jewish view on this whole thing, and that is the concept of the Ramban Nachmanides. Right, he was the chief rabbi of Barcelona in the 13th century, and perhaps we could think of as the Jewish scholar par excellence. He wrote on the Talmud, he wrote books of law, he wrote commentaries on the Torah. Right, he knew philosophy. He was very much, and he was a Kabbalist too. So he had everything, all the different pieces of the puzzle he had in his hand, and he says. He tries this, let's go back to the context, the military context in which we learned this idea. Now, what's the message? Why would it, I think my sister who's studying history now told me that when you, and I've heard it from my professors also, when you study history, when you study law, you always have to ask yourself, if there's a law, it means that somebody is wanting to break the law or actually breaking the law. That's why the law is there. So why would somebody want to destroy the fruit trees around the city? Why would anyone want to do that? Starvation, good. Right. To conquer the city. So now let's take a look at the Ramban source number 4.
Navina? Would you like to read?
Source number 4, you're a volunteer.
The reason for this prohibition is that soldiers lay waste to the city and countryside in case this may help to conquer it. But you should not do this to destroy it. But you should instead trust in God that you will be successful in conquering this.
How do you understand that? What's the message?
Don't wait for the sake of it.
Are they destroying for the sake of destruction? They're destroying it. Why?
Because they think of themselves.
Not vengeance.
Because they think they might need it.
They think they might need it, and what's going to be if they win the war that way? What will happen afterwards?
They will think that they can do it without God's help.
Right. Okay. That's one piece of it, and that's I just trust in God. But before we get to that, what's going to happen if they win the war like that?
Well, they're going to have their own crops then. The crops already established.
Well, that's right. They're going to have nothing. If they win the war by destroying the fruit trees.
That's not by vengeance. Just don't destroy that as vengeance. Leave it there.
They're going to win the battle.
You don't get the spoils of war.
Exactly. In other words, if we can bring it to happen, you're looking in the short term. You're thinking, hey, I am desperate right now. I need to do anything I can to win this battle. I'm going to lay waste to the countryside, and then hopefully I'll win. And it's an act of desperation. It's an act looking precise only the short term. What's the Ramban saying? He's saying that we're talking about the Jewish army entering the land of Israel for the first time, coming out of Egypt. God has promised this land to your forefathers. You will prevail. This land will be your land. And the perspective that you have to go into is that I'm not desperate. I don't need the quick fix. I don't need to take down this city at all costs, but I need to look to the future. I need to look to the next generation. I need to look to what happens the day after. What happens after the dust settles. And I think that what the Ramban does, he takes this whole discussion we've been having, and he places it on one foundation. And that foundation is faith in God. Right? Because a person who has faith in God has faith in the future. A person who believes that we're here for a reason believes that the future will come and it should be prepared for. That there will be another generation. That there will be continuity. And if we approach all of our life from that perspective, that unique Jewish perspective, right, of believing the value of the world, that we're here for a reason, so then suddenly this long-range perspective makes sense. Like, all of a sudden, when we have the story of history that we see unfolding before us into the future, we need to prepare for our children. We need to prepare for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, because the future will come and it's up to us what it's going to look like. The city will fall. But is it going to be with the fruit trees, with the gifts of nature that we got from before, or without them? That's up to us to decide. But the future will come, and that's perhaps, I think, is what encapsulates the Jewish approach to our entire topic. And if you're curious,
everyone okay saying a little bit more?
If you're curious, that's my picture. That's what I'd like to present here. And if you'd like to see a little footnote, take a look at how this approach even carries over to what we saw in the Talmud itself. And if someone would like to volunteer very quickly just to read that last source. Go ahead.
Even though it is permissible to tear clothes and destroy vessels in order to feign anger, to discipline the members of one's household, and it is related in the Talmud here that many of the sages did so, nevertheless a wise man should not be in such a habit, lest improper people who cannot differentiate between feigned anger and true anger learn from his ways.
In other words, this approach of looking at the long range informs us going forward. Right? Remember, the Talmud is never a closed discussion. There's always more to add to the next generation. And what we're seeing here is that once we have this long-range perspective, then we're able to see that perhaps, even though for some people in some situations something could appear to be a proper disciplinary action, but even in our interactions with other people, we always have to look at the long-range impact. We always have to look at the model that we're setting for others on every different level. And with that, thank you very much.
Yes.